What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another Sankarshan Joshi trip. I just finished recording this podcast, and this has been one of my favorite podcasts. On this episode, we have Dan. He is the creator and host of his podcast where he talks about spirituality and his spiritual journey. This episode, we connected on a lot of spiritual elements. Like, my spiritual beliefs are in line with his spiritual belief. We started this podcast talking about manifestation and what manifesting growth is, and then slowly we moved into talking about like a little bit of Bhagavad Gita and like Hinduism, and we basically had a conversation about our definitions of what spirituality is. And trust me when I say this, this episode keeps getting better and better. So make sure you listen till the end. I'm stoked you guys are listening to this. Hope you guys have fun.
A Sankarshan Joshi trip.
First of all, let me start off by thank you for being here and you've made time and we are finally making this happen. Like there's been a lot of back and forth with the time zone and all of that, but like finally we're
Yeah,
doing this. Thank you for being here.
absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Could you introduce like what your podcast is about? Like because that's how I happen to know you, right? Like that's the reason why we are here. Uh, I stumbled upon your podcast and I've heard you talk about your second episode on manifestation of growth, and I heard that and I was super fascinated because like manifestation is a terminology that a lot of people use and it's been used for like a really long time to sell a lot of different things. But like when I heard you talk about manifestation, uh, I could really connect with like my definition of manifestation. So like could you just start off by introducing like what your podcast is about? And
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, the Quest for Cimmeria is my podcast. That's also the name of my Instagram handle. And it's just about, overcoming hardship in your life and using the things that happen in life and the suffering that we all go through as human beings to kind of as in the process of overcoming that to like learn lessons from it and to gain a certain amount of growth, not only so that you don't repeat that kind of suffering, but so that you can become stronger and then you can help other people. It's all about getting better so we can be our best selves to do the best work for others. So, and
absolutely.
that takes for me, I think that takes a holistic approach. So it's part of it is spiritual, and part of it is working on your mental strength, but physical training and nutrition and taking care of your body. It's all part of the same thing. You can't have one without the other. So you have to have all of it together. So it kind of, as the podcast goes, I'll be touching on more and more of those kinds of things and having people on that can talk about specifics and stuff. So yeah, that's what it's about. It's just about growth and kind of realizing also that a lot of that growth, like you were saying that manifestation has been used a lot of different ways and it's has a lot of different flavors depending on who you're talking to. But a lot of what I see is that you need to take the pain and suffering and the things that are wrong in your life and the things that make you unhappy, and you need to work on those and change that into something that you can use. That's how I see it, and it's a lot of the core of what I've done in my life to overcome a lot of things, and the core of what the podcast is about using that kind of internal suffering and the pain involved that we all have as humans to cultivate growth.
Yes, and also like in the
you know
process of me doing this podcast, like I've had a couple of psychologists on the podcast too. It's like what human beings go through, like the pain it creates them, right? Like it forms their personality, like how they see the world and how they approach the world.
Absolutely.
Probably like all the thoughts, like the source of all their thoughts is the pain and suffering they've been through or probably like going through, right?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. You know, the experiences you have, good or bad, they shape your reality, and then that shapes your behavior,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just brief you on like how I got into this manifestation, like how that word got embedded in my head. Like it was 10 years back. Like my parents were working for a company called Amway. Like there's this part of Amway where you network, and it's basically like a pyramid scheme where you sell products, and so they kind of sell this philosophy of, you know what, like you can become rich, and they sell this like manifestation books and all of that. So that's how I stumbled upon like Secret. um
Right.
I'm
Right.
sure you've
Yeah, like
heard
The
of that.
Secret.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
Secret
of
book.
course.
And I was very young when I like heard Secret, when I watched the documentary, the video version of the series. And it's so fascinating because like the way they talk, I like when I was a kid, like I thought that was very practical, and I almost like followed whatever they're talking about. But as I grew up, like I didn't see any meaning out of it. Like the way how they talk about manifestation is just about like visualizing things. It's more of you thinking about like what you want. You just sitting on a couch, and then like you sort of meditating on like what you want in life. It didn't talk about like action. It didn't talk about growth. It didn't talk about pain. It didn't talk about suffering. It didn't talk about any of that.
No, yeah, it ignores a lot of that.
Yeah. And so coming from that background, like over the period of time, my definition of a lot of things has changed. So right now, how I see manifestation is you can literally manifest a reality if you focus on growth. If you focus on like growing yourself. So right now, if I want to do great with this podcast, I'd probably manifest healthy behaviors and healthy action of doing the podcast, which would take me there than fantasizing on the goal itself.
Right. Absolutely. You have to take action.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You can think about it as much as you want and build the perfect scenario, but then you get the analysis paralysis. You know,
Yeah.
it has to be perfect before you even try to start, you know, in your head. So you never start. So you don't manifest it, but then you just go through the kind of initial fear and anxiety of starting. And by doing that, the action, then you're taking the step to take that visualization and actually send it out, because you're taking the steps to do it, and then it compounds, you know, and it keeps building and building and building, you know. I'm sure as you've done it, every episode has become smoother and easier and it flows out better, right? I'm sure.
Yes. So
Yeah.
it has become better when I focus on growth, when I focus on like me getting better at doing this. So like initially when I started, like it has never been about like views, or it has never been about like making money or like becoming famous. It has always been about like talking to people with different perspectives. And
Yeah.
so yeah, like there's so much learning that happens like when I talk to people. And that's how I manifest my like let's say future guests, or like the quality. So my manifestation is more of quality and learning than the
Yeah.
goal itself, like the
Yeah.
destination.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's how I feel. The same thing about my podcast. Even in the first episode, I said that it's not about any of that. It's about being able to talk about things that either will help somebody or reach somebody and make them think differently, and just about spreading wisdom and, you know, and love and light, you know,
Yeah.
and growth. That's what it is.
So like when I went through your profile, I I actually found a post where you lost a bunch of weight. Like right now you're exercising, and then I
Yeah.
see you wear that the rudraksh, the mala.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
call it mala. So you wear that, and I see like you're much more like spiritual and holistic, like you mentioned, like while you were introducing your podcast. Like I can see that at some point of time this change started, right? Like what was that tipping point where you decided to like lose weight, or like start this podcast, or like you know, you talk about gratitude and all your spiritual process. So where did it begin?
Yeah. It began a couple years ago, probably 3, 4 years ago. I was 4 years ago. I was overweight. I was at 320 pounds. So I'm 6'7", like I'm very tall, 200 centimeters. Like,
Oh,
so
wow.
yeah. Uh, so I was like 320 pounds and I was too heavy, and my joints, just from being this tall, I've always had kind of like joint pain in my back and my knees. And being so heavy, it was really taking a toll on me. And like I said, I work construction, so that's already, you know, pretty laborious on the body. And I wasn't working out, and I was eating a lot of like garbage food, fast food, pizza. Um, so drinking a lot of beer. And so one day I just decided that I like looked myself in the mirror and I was like, it's too much. It was too excessive, and I was feeling like crap, and I needed to make a change. And I never do anything like halfway, I always go full in to whatever I do. So I knew that I had to prepare myself for something that was going to be kind of like a shock to my system, because I knew I wasn't going to, if I took it gradual and easy, then I wouldn't be able to sustain it. I had to just go in and like hammer it hard and then stick to it. And then that way I could see results quicker, and that would keep me going, as opposed to if I took it slowly, I would go a lot easier on myself. So I had to really change that mentality. And around that time, for some other reasons, I went completely vegan, and I was vegan for 3 years up until this February. And I lost 105 pounds. And I don't, part of it's because of the diet, but a lot of it was because I started doing like really heavy intermittent fasting. So just eating like 1 hour a day, one meal like in a 1 hour window a day. So I think the majority of the weight was because of that, because when I finally got down to my lowest weight, which was like 105 pounds down, it was 115 pounds or 215 pounds. I was very weak, and all of my inflammation that had gone had suddenly like tripled, and I was in so much pain I couldn't move. And I started reading about um, the carnivore diet and how that helps people with joint inflammation. So I switched over to that, and I've been doing that since February, and that's helped out. It's helped build more muscle on my body. It helps my energy, and it's helped repair a lot of the damage and reduce a lot of the pain I feel in my joint issues. So it's been a lot of, and in through that process, that was just the physical part. It was the physical that started it off, because I was unsatisfied with how I was feeling. And in that process, I picked up mental growth habits and spiritual practices. And so that all kind of moved together. And then around that time, I started listening to, you were talking about psychologists. I don't know if you know Jordan Peterson is.
Yes. I put a
Yeah.
story
So,
today, like I was listening to him talk. Uh,
yeah. So I started listening to some of his lectures, and then I read his book, and his book was very, it was great, very influential to me. And around that time, I started listening to Jocko Willink. He's a Navy SEAL.
yes.
So I
Yes,
started
I do
listening
know him.
to
Yeah.
more of his stuff, and then David Goggins as well. And David Goggins' book Can't Hurt Me really helped kick everything into high gear maybe like a year and a half ago, and that's when a lot of it really, everything kind of all slammed together. um, because about halfway through, like 2 years into being vegan, um, this is like 2 years ago, i I was always into like Buddhist practices, right? Like
Okay.
meditating, and I was always into just the base teachings, and it was something that always resonated for me, even when I was very young, probably like 12, 13 years old. I just was always fascinated by it. And then 2 years ago, I was somewhere, I was at a restaurant or a convention or something like that that had something to do with vegan food. And there were the ISKCON Hare Krishnas were there, and I got a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. So I started reading the Bhagavad Gita, and I had a couple friends who read it and also recommended it to me. So that tied a lot into the thoughts I already had, like life philosophy and the way that people should kind of behave, or the way that a person should behave, and carry themselves. And it really resonated deeply with me. So that kind of led more to reading a lot more of the Vedic stuff and getting into that and starting chanting. And so it's kind of a mix of Buddhist and Vedic, and it just kind of goes where it is. And just that's what appeals to me, and it makes sense to me. And yeah, I don't know.
So, what were the key takeaways that you took from Gita? Like, what were the points that resonated with you the most?
Um, so like the one specific part when Arjuna drops his bow and he basically is proclaiming that he doesn't want to kill, his uncles and his relatives and his friends on the opposing army. And Krishna tells him to stand up and don't weep for the men who he's already killed, because, like, we're only here temporarily. And, it references the karmic cycle and the cycle of rebirth. So I think the overcoming of fear is possibly like the biggest factor in our own growth. So I think that is something that really hit deeply with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the best thing about Gita, like I haven't really finished it, but I've started reading it. Like one of the beautiful thing about Gita that I observe is the philosophy is so vague, the philosophy is so vast that each individual person, they have their own journey, right? Like we talked about, like each person has their own pain, like each person has different experiences with life. So when they read Gita, it is actually they're seeing from the perspective of what they have been through, and all the philosophies, they come in line with like their life. When they look back, they take this philosophy and they apply it with that part of their lives. So it is
Right.
so, you, like anybody could relate with the philosophy of like what they have been through.
Absolutely. That's a very good way of putting it. And that's exactly how I felt when I read it, because like I said, it really resonated with a lot of things that I had already felt. And that's a great way of putting it.
I mean, I'm so fascinated by at the moment when you snapped, right? Like basically before you decided that you want to do something with your life, like you were tired of how you were being and you wanted to make some changes and move towards like betterment of your own self. And like, oh, like that growth, like when you decided to make a certain change, there's so many things that you equip yourself to make that change possible, right? Like for you it looks like you've taken like a lot of drastic measures, like initially like with the intermittent fasting, like if you're eating 1 hour a day and you went vegan. Like there is something about snapping and deciding to make a change for yourself. Like there is something about deciding to have better things for yourself. And a lot of people, like they won't do that. Like it looks like when somebody decides to make a change or like grow, they grow in all directions, they grow in all dimensions, right? Like for you, the same thing happened with me too. Like I lost 60 to 70 pounds of body weight. Like I was like
Awesome.
I was close to obese, and while I was making those changes, I was also like reading other spiritual text. So it's like when you decide to grow, you always seek for things that would like even mentally heal you, and like not just physical, right? Like it's
Right.
multi-dimensional.
Right. Yeah, you're looking for truth. Yeah,
Yeah.
for the truth of well-being. And I think that, yeah, some people don't get to the point where you do have to kind of, well, I don't know if it's for everybody, but I know for me, and I guess people like me, it does have to get to a point where there is a snap, and then that's what causes the change. And I think, and this is, like I said, I've always been fascinated by Buddhism, and I think this is kind of ties into it, is I think you get a bit of clarity when you realize that the majority of the suffering that you have in your life and the majority of things that make you unhappy, you have complete control over them.
It's
You
your
know,
creation.
it's your creation. So as soon as you realize that, or as soon as I realized it, I'm going to start hitting it with a sledgehammer and start breaking it down. I'm not going to look at it and keep being upset about the size of this monstrosity. I'm going to see it, realize that I can destroy it because I made it, and then I'm going to just start smashing my head into it until it breaks apart, and that's just, yeah, because, and that's the thing is it's because you don't know if today is your last day, you don't know how much more time you have to work on that.
Yeah.
And right, so there is a sense of urgency, and that is kind of what creates your drive. Your drive to do better every day and to stay focused is because you don't know how much more time you have. And the more you're able to heal yourself and the more you're able to grow, the better suited you are to help other people that you encounter in your day. If you see someone suffering, or you are one of your relatives or a friend is suffering, if you've consistently put in the work to do better for yourself, you're in a better place to help that person.
Yeah.
And like I said, you don't know how much time you have, not only with your own life, but you don't know how much longer the people that you care about are going to be in your life. And
Yeah.
this whole, like you were referencing when we first started with the pandemic and everything, now you really don't know. You really don't know what's going to happen day to day. So that should, I think it really starts with your like thought process. There's so much going on, and there's so many things, things we want, and our job, and things we want to do, all this kind of stuff, social media and the news and family, and there's so many things that we focus on. But I think that when you kind of break it down and you start to really kind of think about, oh, well, yeah, all this stuff is going on, but I don't know how many more days I have left, and I don't know how many more days my family members have left. It kind of shrinks down your attention to really only pay the most attention to those things that really mean the most to you. It blocks out all the other, crap, So I think that cultivating gratitude is a big part of, the inner growth too, you know?
Yeah. Things are moving so rapidly, like things are changing so rapidly, especially with social media. Like we have a distraction, like it's like a simulation world where people are living around fakeness. Like you don't know what is real, you don't know what is fake. Like there is a sense of
Yeah.
pressure that they have to be a certain people on social media to grab certain amount of attention, and like
Yeah.
surrounding with that sort of energy, and like it gets super hard to make a change and move towards growth, right? Like because growth is always uncomfortable, like you're always in this bubble of comfort zone, and like in order to for like good things to happen, or in order for you to be happy, you have to face challenges, right? Like when you overcome those challenges, that's when you're gonna have be happy. Like with a
Yeah.
lot of people around, since they're not seeking growth, since they're in their comfort zone, they're not making any change, so they don't
Right.
have that gratification. So that's why a lot of people are sad, like they feel lost because they're not moving towards growth.
No, that's very true. I think like a materialistic culture is bad for humanity. I'm not saying it's wrong to have nice things, but I think that the constantly going out and trying to get the newest thing, or like you said, it's just there's a lot of like fakeness, and a lot of people who aren't very genuine, and it's weird. And a lot of people live in that crazy headspace, and they live in a comfort seeking headspace. And I'm not saying that everything has to always be difficult and comfort is bad, but like you said, in order to make growth and make process, you have to go out into what is uncomfortable. You
Yeah.
have to make changes, because if you don't make changes, you're going to just stay the way you are.
Yeah, if you keep doing the same things, you're gonna be at the same
Yeah,
place, you're gonna do the same thing. Like it's like a constant
absolutely.
loop. The loop has to break somewhere, right? Like you have to do something differently to get like a different output.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
And
Absolutely.
this brings me to the concept of like manifesting like growth, manifestation is all about thoughts, right? And thoughts become action. Like this is how I see. So I have this strong mindset about doing something that I should be responsible, like sort of create a purpose for me to wake up the next day and do something, like create a hope, and
Yeah.
this thought manifests itself into action.
Yeah.
And so that's how you move towards growth, right? This is my definition of like manifesting growth.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, you use it, like you were saying earlier, some people just put it in their head and say, "Oh, I want this," and I keep my thoughts on this, but they don't take the action step, right? So, but you're using it kind of to psych you up and get you energized to take those steps because it's like a goal that you're working towards rather than just something that you stuck on your wall and you
Yeah.
ignore or you look at and just hope someday it's gonna, you know. And I think that's the problem. I think with a lot of people is that they don't realize that the action is involved because even the same thing with spirituality, right? You could pray to whoever, right? It doesn't matter, Christian, Hindu, Jew, Muslim, whatever, right? You could pray to whatever it is that you believe in, but if you don't take the steps necessary to achieve what you believe in, that's not gonna, it's not gonna happen, and then you can't get frustrated that whoever didn't, gift you with it or the universe didn't bring it into your lap. Like you have to, sure, it's good to pray and it's good to set that intention. Absolutely. I do that all the time, you know? Um, but then you have to carry on and you have to go on the quest.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, like I'm able to relate with you on so many different terms because, like, even with the spirituality and even with prayer, like people are like especially in our generation because we don't have any survival problems, right? Like we have existential problems which are created by our own head. Like
Yeah.
we don't have like a wild bear hunting us. It's not that
Right.
there's not a famine or a drought or like there's no like pandemic. It's here,
Yeah.
but it's not as
There's
deadly. Yeah,
there's no raiders that are coming to your village to kill everybody, right? Like you don't have to
yeah,
worry about that.
yeah.
Like,
So we don't have any survival problems. So most of our problems are existential problems, and especially with our generation, there's so much victim mentality, like Jordan Peterson talks about, right? Like we feel like the world owes us something. Like it feels like if something isn't happening for us, we blame the system. We blame how things aren't working. Like we enter this victim mentality, and as long as
yeah,
you're
very
feeling,
entitled.
yeah, and as long as you're feeling sorry for yourself and you're busy like being the victim, you don't even have the thought process to move towards growth or to be a better version of who you could be.
No, because that's the problem with that mentality is you're telling yourself that you're the victim. So then you become a victim. It's the same as if, like I said, like, it's the same as if you go out and you run every day, then your body's going to take on the body of a runner because that's the stress that you're consistently putting it under, right? If you lift weights every day, your body's going to change because of so if you think, "Oh, I'm a victim and things aren't fair every day," and that's what you think all the time, then that's what you're going to attract toward you. And you're not going to have success and you're not going to have good luck and you're not going to have good relationships because you're you're calling all of that towards you because you refuse to think with a positive mindset.
Yeah. Thoughts become action, right? Like if you
Absolutely.
if you are seeing yourself as a victim of the system or like with whatever is happening, that means
Yeah.
these victim thoughts would make you a victim because those thoughts are translating into action.
Yeah, you're not gonna, right, exactly what you said. And but you said you manifest and you think of the goal that you have, and that drives the next day or that morning of that day, that drives your action. So it's kind of like, this is how I think about it when I wake up in the morning. As soon as I wake up, I do my meditations and chants. And the way I see it is like I wake up in the morning and that's like the computer coming on, and I get a chance to put in, like, front load whatever programs that I want before, like, all the virus, before, like, that's what I'm saying. But as soon as you step out of like your room or you step out of your house, then you're at the mercy of what the world is going to throw at you, right? As soon as you pick up your phone in the morning, you don't know what you're going to see, right? So you need to prepare yourself. You got to like put your armor on in the morning. So that way, when you turn on the news and it's like, oh, here's this horrible thing that happened, because the news is always bad, right? There's never good news, you know? Or you see someone's talking shit about somebody on Instagram or whatever it is, or you got a stressful day ahead of you. If you wake up and you put the work in right away and you set that positive mindset right away, then the rest of the day is not going to affect you, as opposed to if you wake up all upset that you don't get to snooze in and you hate your job, and the first thing you do is like grab coffee and grumble and turn the news on. That's the mindset that you're now in, because you're like so vulnerable. You're like a blank slate in the morning. So instead of like filling that slate up with all the positive stuff that you want to operate on, you're just letting the world throw whatever it's going to throw at you. And then that's how you behave the rest of the day. And then you wonder why, things don't go the way you want them to go.
It's so true, right? Like, because so what you're saying is, like, when you wake up in the morning, you build a foundation of how you're gonna approach things. You want to build a foundation of uh you want to start a day with a blank slate, with a composed mindset, right?
Yeah, you want to start the day. Yeah, yeah, you start the day with a blank slate. So you want to be able to, yeah, compose yourself before, that's what David Goggins says. He said, as soon as you step out your front door, he's like, the world is going to fuck you up, and you got to be prepared for it. I'm sorry, I don't mean to swear. I don't know if that's okay.
Yeah,
Um,
you can swear, like
but
there's no such rule
uh,
here.
all right, yeah. Um, but yeah, it's true. You have to. You wouldn't, if you think of every day as like an adventure, like you wouldn't go on an adventure without being prepared. So as soon as you get up, just start preparing, because if you don't set your programming for the day, the world is going to dictate your
Yeah,
programming.
our mind is so malleable, right? Like, there's so many things that beat us and shape us differently as how they want. So if you focus on the foundation, and if you be less malleable throughout the day, probably like you're gonna be less influenced by like an external emotion, right? Like that could trigger any sort of anxiety or trigger any sort of hatredness or anger. So like in that sense, like meditation adds a lot of value.
Yeah, absolutely. It keeps stuff from sticking to you.
Yeah.
And then I think also it keeps you like you're malleable, and you do want to take on a certain form so things bounce off of you. So you want to have a certain mindset that you set, and that's how you operate. But at the same time, I think the meditation is good because it does center you and it makes you really grateful. So even when things don't go your way, even if you're totally prepared, but you get caught off guard or something gets you, right? You still don't have to sway too far from your center, because you have the perspective now that you can see it as a blessing, or you could see it as a challenge, or you could see it as a lesson or a way to grow, rather than letting it completely destroy you. So it doesn't mean that, and that's the thing that I think people don't understand about like the manifestation is, you can have all the mindset, you can have the practice. It doesn't mean that everything is going to happen perfectly. You get to like, and that's the thing is like, you don't have to hold on to any particular outcome, you know like you said, like you just put out what you want and you take the steps to achieve it, and you have to have the open-mindedness, and I think the meditations and stuff help with this, that you can ask for what you want, but you can't ask for how it's going to be delivered to you you
Yeah,
know
yeah,
so if you want your podcast to grow, for instance, you're just taking the steps to go out there and make the best podcast you can every time. And like you said, like you're manifesting, guests onto your podcast, and you're manifesting the growth of your podcast, as opposed to trying to get a specific person and working towards that goal because you're trying to build, a specific amount of numbers, and you're supposed to trying to build a specific thing. Like, you're just trusting that through your actions it's going to grow in the best way that it knows, because the universe is only going to do things in the most efficient, best way.
And also the other part, right, like coming back to thoughts become action, like I feel this is so interesting because scientifically, right, like if you want to eat food, if you're hungry, it's a thought of like you need to go to the kitchen, right, even before you eat the
Yeah.
food, like it starts from there. And also, like if you
Yeah.
want to lift your hand, uh first your brain should send a signal of lifting the hand, even, and then your hand lifts, right? So on
Yeah.
a very scientific level, your thoughts become action. So even before
Yeah.
you do something, your brain actually manifests that. Like if you want to lift your hand, your brain sends the
Yeah.
neuron which manifests that action.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever read any of this stuff by Dr. Rupert Sheldrake
No.
or Dean Radin, Dr.
N-
Dean Radin?
no,
They're
I haven't.
really they're both they talk a lot about that, and they talk about a lot of like parapsychology, and it all ties into that, and they both have a lot of really great like studies on it. I'll link you the books. I
Sure,
highly
sure.
recommend them. I'll make a post about them too. But what you said, like, yeah, there's signals that are running in your body almost before the thought even happens, because all these processes have to take place, right? But you don't even, yeah, that's crazy, right?
That's so crazy because, like, whatever we've been through in our life, it frames our subconscious, right? And this subconscious frames our gut feeling. Like sometimes we feel uneasy, or sometimes we feel unsafe in a certain environment. That's our subconscious, and that's our gut telling us, you know what, like this is unsafe. And this subconscious is framed from the past experiences, right? Like in that way
Yeah.
also, like your past experiences and uh, how you how you process your experiences will also manifest the further actions. So that's where the spiritual aspect comes into picture, right? Like where you have to find an outlet of your trauma, like you have to deal with it, or that trauma is going to dictate, that trauma is going to manifest itself uh, into action.
Yeah, that's how you get toxic behaviors, and that's how, a lot of, yeah, I think a lot of just the bad things, addiction and a lot of mental disease and people who are very unhappy and suicidal and all this stuff. I think it all comes from unaddressed trauma, or these traumatic experiences that people have, and they don't have a way to address it, and bring it to light and heal from it. And like you said, those are the things in people's lives that, they're kind of like the pictures that are the clearest in their head, and that's what they dictate their behaviors on, and it's sad, and that's a whole big part of it, is when you see other people suffering, you realize that more than likely it's because of something internal that they're not dealing with.
There's a Vedic chanting, like a Sanskrit chanting, which I personally connect to. It says Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu, sarve jana sukhino bhavantu, which means you're literally praying for the welfare of humanity. You're praying for every human being to be happy. And every time I say that, like I get goosebumps because there are a lot of people who have caused a lot of pain in my life. And every time I chant that, I think of all the people and I'm wishing well for them. And it sort of nullifies the hatredness inside me. Like I don't hate them anymore. So like in
Right.
that aspect, like in that sense, there is that side of manifestation too. You stop the hatred from
Yeah,
manifesting.
absolutely. That's every morning when I meditate. That's one of the practices I do. That they, the one Buddhist monk that I follow, a lot of what he says, and he says that one of the goals of the breath meditation is to cultivate a sense of well-being inside of yourself. Because the focusing on your breath, really calms you down, and then trying to radiate that sense of well-being to like everyone on the planet. So like you cultivate it in yourself first, and then you radiate it out. And so it's funny that you said that's what you do too with your chanting. So that's really cool.
I mean, like spiritual practices and all the rituals, right? Like people sort of tend to neglect it or see it in a very see it as a dumb thing, right? Like it, people don't really think about like spirituality or think about like praying and rituals, all of that. They kind of feel, because there is no scientific explanation of anything good happening from that, like people tend to disregard that, right? And there is a there is a lot of like things that would develop from being consistent and from saying things, from actually generating a sense of positive, like a positivity, right? Like that's what all these rituals are. Like you doing prayer, you're literally trying to like manifest positivity for your own self,
Right.
and that is a consistent process, and you do it every day, right? Like it's a practice.
Yeah, it's a practice every day. Yeah. Um, it's funny. People do tend to disregard it, right? But I think that the problem with people is that they're focused too close on like our current time frame. Technologically, 100 years ago is nothing like what it is now. But if you think about humanity from the beginning of time, right? All of our ancestors all across the globe, right? Before like modern science came into effect, which was only, it's not that a couple hundred years old, or you can go back to the Greeks and things like that, but we're talking about science where people want like proof, and they want studies and things like that where they need proof of God, and they think that spiritualism is silly. People have had spiritual practices since the dawn of time. So spiritual practices and chanting and meditation and prayer, that's the original science. Like, because it started from the beginning and it got us all the way here. So like that's what shaped civilization, and that's what shaped culture, and that's what grew the world, was people figuring out and understanding spiritual practices, and every culture had different tiers of spiritual practices and different levels, and there were spiritual masters, and every civilization cultivated those things. So that was the like original initial science that everyone figured out together. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So to say that, oh, science doesn't prove God, it's like, no, God is like, it's there's no proving anything. Like, that's you being here is proof that spirituality works, because that's what built the world.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah, and it's so interesting how Jordan B. Peterson says, talks about God, right? Like he says there is something in your hierarchy that you do, the top of whatever that is. Let's say if you, like on top of your life, if it's money, if that's like, if that takes the most priority to you, that is God, right? Like for everybody, whatever is the first in hierarchy list is God. Like that's how Jordan B. Peterson says it, right?
yeah,
And uh, like it's just a thought of like the God being there, and you seeing things from that perspective could change, even though if like God exists or not, like that's secondary. There's a lot of positive things that comes in just belief. There doesn't
yeah,
have to be logic. Like there's no harm in
no,
believing, right? Like if something that's coming out, it's only good things.
right. And that's why, yeah, absolutely. And like you said, you see things from the perspective of what it is that you hold, most high to you. And I think that's why a lot of, spiritual, whether it's like gods and goddesses or like deities, like, or figures, like they're archetypal in some way. They represent some kind of philosophy and some form of behavior, right? And that's why it becomes like easily, you identify with like the artwork of this thing, and then that guides you, and the imagery and visualization of this thing that guides you. Yeah. So it's whatever you focus on. And yeah, if you focus on money, then that's what becomes most important to you. But if you focus on spirituality and growth and doing good and trying to cultivate that, then I think that that's what, you know you are driven towards, and that's how you see things, and that's what becomes the priority to you.
Yeah, and spirituality is never a community thing, right? Like community could help you bring rituals and practices that you do every day, but your spiritual journey is your journey. When I say spiritual, it
Absolutely.
could be any form of growth. It could be an emotional growth, it could be like a physical growth, it could be like in general of uh, a heightened sense of how your life is moving. It's just getting new perspective. That is, according to me, is spiritual. And so yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like we're all going in the same direction, but the path, we each take our own path, you know?
Yeah.
And as long as you're every day taking another step down the path, it doesn't matter if it's physical growth or emotional growth, right? You know, it doesn't matter because you're keep going. And as long as you just trust the process and you keep making forward progress, then, you know, you can't lose, you know?
Yeah. And growth is multidimensional. If you grow in one aspect,
Yes.
the chances that you grow in other is also possible. Like if you grow in one dimension, the other dimension also grows. So, like when I started lifting weights, there is something empowering about it. So when I started getting physically stronger, when I started like working out, like when I took working out seriously, and when I started developing a discipline around it, there's a lot of other emotional things that grew along with it. Like I'm much more confident. There's a lot of insecurities that being nullified. I'm no more I'm comfortable in my own skin. So
Yeah.
like there's a lot of other emotional growth that happened with this physical growth.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and I think that physical training definitely it does help cultivate a different mindset, you know, because if you're there pushing yourself through a workout, right, and you're really like exhausting yourself, you realize that you are capable of overcoming difficult things, you know? And yeah, you have endorphins and hormones and things that all the actual physiological things that happen in your body that affect your brain chemistry, you have that. But after, you know, repetitive exercise and staying consistent with exercise, it you become accustomed to that level of discomfort and you become accustomed to that level of activity and you grow into it. So now being sedentary and sitting around a lot and just lounging doesn't appeal to you as much as maybe going out and going for a walk. You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
if I'm like hanging out with my friends, I would much rather be like working out with them or going for a walk or doing something like that than sitting on a couch and like playing video games, which is what I would have liked to do years ago. I would have loved to play video games or Magic the Gathering or board games or Dungeons and Dragons. Like I love a lot of like nerdy stuff. Um, you know, and that's what I used to love doing. But now that I've changed, you know, what I do every day, I would much rather go hiking and lift weights and just do have a good time outside, you know, be active, you know, that's what brings me a lot of joy now. You know, so you think that you like the things you like, but it's only because you continue the behaviors that you continue. You know, if you change your behavior, you know, maybe your goals will change and maybe the things that bring you happiness will change. You know, maybe you're just stuck in a cycle of thinking like the only way that I can get better in life is if I like keep grinding away at this job that is like breaking me down because eventually I'll have enough money to do this and that and then I can jump up the next level in this. But if you maybe reprioritize the way that you think and you get into a fitness routine, and I say fitness routine because that's probably it's the hardest place to start, but it's also the easiest place to start because you know maybe you don't have the inner forces to like pay attention enough to do meditation. I think most people do, but some people don't. But like anybody can get down and start doing push-ups or go for a walk, right? So like you force your body to do something and like in the process of like forcing your body to do something, you're going to become healthier so you'll work your body will work more efficiently, but you're also building up willpower, you know? You're not depleting your willpower by making yourself do that. You are in the moment, right? Like you deplete a little bit of your willpower to go out and do that hard workout. But then like when you recover from it, your threshold of willpower is much higher. You have so much more to burn because it becomes part of who you are. So then you realize how much joy that brings you and how much joy eating good quality food, you know, as opposed to junk food makes you, right? And you start to change things. And before you know it, maybe your job isn't what is the priority, to you. Maybe cutting back on your expenses and living like a more minimalist lifestyle is something that appeals to you, because you realize that the things that really bring you joy aren't material things. You never know. It does bring a different mindset. And I think that that will happen to anybody who really embraces it, because I think that, the way that our ancestors lived is closer to like our base humanity and the way we should live, as opposed to like how we live in modern society right now. There's too much external stimulation. There's too many things that we focus on that aren't actually like within our life, as opposed to, like you said, our ancestors, the only way that they right now, we have chronic low to mid-level stress 24/7 because of everything that's coming at us, because it's existential, right? Our ancestors and people from the beginning of time, their stress response was like, oh shit, there's a tiger over there, like,
Yeah.
or right, like that was like, that's when like the stress response came in, and that was like through all of humanity until like the modern era. So if you think about it, like the human biology has evolved to like, that's when you're supposed to fire off adrenaline, and that's when you're supposed to be under anxiety. You're not supposed to be constantly stimulated all the time, like they had to deal with those kinds of threats, but then there was also extended periods of rest and community and tradition and religion and a culture, so like it was a lot smaller and focused on like day-to-day life. And I think that that is, our human biology has evolved to that. That's what we have been. The vast majority of time that humans have been on the planet was living that, some semblance of that kind of lifestyle, up until the modern era. And I think the modern era is, with as great as technology is and technological advancements and health advancements, as great as that is, I think it really took us off course. And that's why like people aren't anywhere near as centered and grounded and happy as they should be,
Yeah, yeah. That's like whatever you said is so true, and I relate to it a lot. And I was reading a Bhagavad Gita, which was like translated by Paramahamsa Yogananda. So Paramahamsa Yogananda, he's a Indian monk who has done a lot of work in the field of spirituality. So he wrote a book. It's basically his translation of Bhagavad Gita, and in that he says that like we human beings have become so much sensory oriented that we are not doing things to please our intelligence. We are doing things to please our senses. We are choosing food that is much more tastier, like which fulfills our sense of taste. Like we wanna like go watch something, let's say porn, because it is releasing a sense of dopamine. Like we want that sensory stimulation. So he also takes back to the analogy of like uses this as a metaphor for Krishna riding the chariot, right? Like there are so many horses. If like you can take one horse to be like one sense. If you let the senses drive, it's gonna be nuts. So he uses Krishna as our intelligence, and he says our intelligence should drive our senses. It shouldn't be the other way around.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I was saying is, like when you start working out and you start doing things consistently, and, waking up early, or whatever, waking up consistently and treating yourself good, you start to build up your willpower. So that way, when, you have the option of eating a healthy meal or a meal that you feel would be much tastier, but it's going to be worse for you, you'll have the willpower to say, oh no, I don't need to eat that garbage food, even though I know that I want whatever that thing is, I'm going to eat this better food. And then then as you keep consistently making those choices, like now there's foods that I would have loved to eat years ago that, like, if I ate them today would 100% make me sick. 100%, like I wouldn't even, without a doubt, would 100% make me sick. Like if I ate like donuts or ice cream or like a cheesesteak sandwich, I would definitely feel very ill, because it's been so long since I've eaten that way. I've been eating, organic and, non-GMO foods. Even when I was a vegan, I was eating all non-GMO. Now I eat all grass-fed meats and stuff. And I always try to eat the best thing that I can, and that's just my personal thing. But it's been so long since I've had a lot of like processed foods and things that were like very hyper palatable and, meant to be, delicious, quote unquote, um, like it would make me sick now to eat it,
Yeah.
but I used to love it, and I used to crave it. I used to want nothing else than that. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? It
Yeah.
wasn't just like, oh, something I liked eating. Like it was like when I thought of like, oh, delicious food, it was like immediately those thoughts of those things. But now I'm like disgusted by it. you know?
I 100% relate with like what you're saying, because I was exactly gonna say the same thing. Like I was about to say, like back like I would love desserts and I'd love all the things
Yeah.
that I like, anything that is sweet, I'd love to eat it. And now I don't. Like when I started working out, that's the thing about growth, right? Like when you seek about growth, or when you do something that seeks your betterment, your value system changes, right? Like you don't want the same things anymore. Like
Yeah.
that goes back to you saying that even if you want to hang out with your friends, you want to do something that is constructive and not sit on a
Right.
couch and play video games, because your set of values have changed.
Right. And that, your set of values changes. So then, and I'll just use as a small example, right? Say you lived like a sedentary life and you weren't into working out, right? And maybe your priority was you wanted to build a new computer for gaming or something like that, right? And you realize, okay, well, it's going to take $2,000 to build this computer because I want all this stuff, right? But if you now start adopting a healthier lifestyle and you start to do those kind of things with your friends, maybe now instead of saving up $2,000, maybe you'll get a gym membership, or maybe you'll buy a really expensive blender or juicer to make juice, you know what I'm saying? Or maybe you'll buy a bunch of kettlebells. Like, so things will change. You're not going to what you thought you wanted. You thought you wanted those things because that was what was going to keep you comfortable inside that bubble. But when you start to push outwards, you start to realize that there's all these other things that bring you much more joy than the stuff that was only comfort based. Like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with playing video games. Like I'll still play some video games with my friends every once in a while, but it's very, very, very small percentage of
You
my
wouldn't
time.
die for it, right? Like you wouldn't die to
No,
play a
no,
video game. Yeah.
no, I still only have like a PlayStation 3. Like I never upgraded past that. Like Skyrim was the last game that I really like cared to play. And if I'm with my friends, it's like 45 minutes of like Smash Brothers. Like it's really nothing crazy, and then that's it. And then
Yeah.
we'll go do something else. Like, and that's only at the end of the night. But yeah, no. So if you change your behaviors, like I said, like you said, your priorities will change, and then you'll be able to realize that there's more ways to live a happy and fulfilled existence than like just what your like base programming told you, and like just what society tells you, like, oh, you have to buy like the new biggest TV. There's nothing wrong with your TV now, but like you need the bigger one because now there's a bigger one,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
And you get like wrapped up in that mindset, and then you think that the only way that you can be happy and be fulfilled is if you have those things. But there's always going to be new things to have. If having the new iPhone is what makes you happy, then you're never going to be happy because in 6 months there's going to be a new iPhone. If but that's what's marketed to people, and you look at people, like the majority of people, that's what they set their value system on, and that's what they value, and that's what they feel, and they value that because they feel that that's what's going to bring them the best quality of life. And it's not true.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
definitely not true.
Yeah.
It's not true at all.
It's so you talking about like when you change your behaviors, you don't want the same things anymore. Like maybe you start wanting different things, right? Partly, most of the things that you want right now, the standard is set by society, right? Like what
Right.
society deems to be cool, or like what society deems to be acceptable, like people want that. So people think that like if you own a new iPhone, probably people think you're cool, or like that there is a point of you being able to show a certain uh, status in the society, right? So when your value
Yeah.
system changes, you don't want to please society anymore. Like, so partly
Yeah.
you'll cut off all on all the things that you're probably buying because you were pleasing society.
Yeah. Same thing. People buying expensive clothes and spending hundreds of dollars on sneakers and jewelry. And it's just, to me, yeah, it's ridiculous. And it's for what? Is it because, like, do you really like the way that those clothes look? And do you really think that they're worth those hundreds of dollars? Or are you willing to spend that money because you think that other people will think you're cool or think that you're have a higher status, or right? Like, do you really like the way that Rolex looks? Like,
Yeah.
is that really, is that really your favorite watch, or is that the most expensive watch you could buy? Right. You know, and I think that people, they put these false value systems into play. And then that's what the problem with that is, that there's no reason. Like, it's not wrong to look nice. Like, I wear, the clothes I wear because I like them, but I also don't want to look like a slob. So it's okay to look nice, but look nice because you want to. Like, don't put a false value, like, if I dress this way people will think, because then you're not really being genuine. You should wear like what makes you happy, not what you're trying to do for other people. And you should always be genuine and always be truthful and always like be who you are always. Like,
Yeah.
that's one thing that I'm like 100% about. Like, I'll always be myself and I'll always say exactly what's on my mind. Like, I don't care if it bothers anybody. I don't care. I've never cared about being cool. Like, I've never cared about fitting in. I never did fit in, you know? So, so like, I've never been about that. And I think that, like I said, I'll never, I'll never give anybody shit for the way that they want to live their life. Whatever makes you happy, live your life that way. you know
Yeah.
just don't come down on me for living the way that I want to live. I think
Yeah.
everyone should be happy being themselves. That's
Yeah.
what I wish for people.
That's the hardest thing, right? Like, if you want to grow, that means you have to probably fix your flaws, you have to do better things. So people live in this denial world where they're not acknowledging their flaws. If you don't even know what you're bad at, how would you want to get better at something? Like, people don't even acknowledge their flaws, right? And
Right,
like,
because it's, yeah.
it's hard. It's hard for people to go and be like, you know what, like I suck at it. You know what, like I am toxic. I am being toxic to other people. Like, it's so hard for people to accept that, right?
Yeah, it's hard for people to accept it, but also, like you were talking about with the victimhood thing, people are told that their problems aren't their fault, or that their problems aren't problems. I think that, and it's a sensitive topic, but like, I don't think like the whole body positivity thing is good.
Yeah.
Like, if you're like, and again, like, if you're very much overweight, like, that's okay. Like, you should love yourself, right? Like, regardless of what your situation is, you should love yourself. But loving yourself, like, shouldn't keep you from making progress.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like, when I was my heaviest, 320 pounds, like, I didn't look at myself in the mirror and say, oh, I hate myself. Like, no, I love myself. I was disappointed in myself, right? But looking at myself and loving myself in that way is like what got me to being that overweight, right? So like, learning to hold myself accountable and love myself the entire way is the process. But you can't just love yourself and then not change your behavior, because if you don't change your behavior, you're just going to continue doing what you're doing, and that behavior is what got you where you are in the first place.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
so like, I have a problem. Like, I'm not saying that I have a problem with people who are overweight. Like, I was there. Like, I have a problem with the way that it's being marketed to people, that like,
Yeah.
you can just be 400 pounds, and no one can say anything. It's like, no, because it's so bad for you, right? To be overweight, it's so bad that there's no plus side to it. It's bad for you physiologically, it's bad for you mentally, And it's really selfish because all the people around you who actually care about you, you're basically just telling them that you don't give a shit about your health, and they're going to have to deal with you, when you get sick, or when you're injured, or when you can't take care of yourself, or when you die early, and you're going to cause all that suffering. So you're causing suffering inside of yourself, and you're causing suffering outside of yourself. And again, like, if you find yourself in the situation where, like, you are in a situation like that, like, just understand that you can start making changes, you know, while loving yourself. But loving yourself doesn't mean staying the way that you are, because that's not how growth is made.
Yeah, yeah. And like basically people who are overweight and obese, they're using self love to stay lazy, to stay in their comfort zone, to not actually break a sweat, right? Like they're using
Yeah,
self love as a way to deceive themselves into being where they are. Like I started telling about like how growth comes from a very uncomfortable point, right? Like growth is uncomfortable, it is hard, but
yeah,
you have to go through that hardship. And if you actually love yourself, you would want to be fit, you would want to be healthy. Like that's where the
yes,
love comes from, right? Like if you're a parent and if you love your kid, you won't feed them candies all the time, right? Like you
right,
say no to candies because you love them.
right,
Yeah,
right. No, that's what I'm saying. No, absolutely. And when you become healthy, you really have a sense of gratitude about how you used to feel and how you feel now. And then that sets, like I said, it affects everything. It helps your mental better. It helps you have a lot more clarity. And yeah, it just, the way I see it, when I see people, because again, like, I can only speak from what I've been through, but I was over 100 pounds overweight, and I did lose the weight, and I think it's possible for anybody to do, and when I see people who are in that shape, I look at it as the way that I looked at myself, is like, this is a person who doesn't know how to care for themselves.
yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I'm saying? There's a person who does not know how to care for, and it's not just overweight. It's people who are chronically stressed, people who are, on anxiety, who are, taking, prescription medications, people who, any kind of suffering that you're going through, it's because this person, they either don't realize that there's work to be done, or they're hiding the fact that there's work to be done, or they're afraid to admit to themselves that there's work to be done, or they're afraid of the pain that doing that work is going to cause. But dude, it's just people who don't have self-care in their life. They're
yeah,
not they're that shows you that they are prioritizing something other than their self-care. And then that's a problem, because, like I said, your self-care has to be number one, because that dictates how well you are able to help other people and solve problems. And if you think back to, our ancestors, when we lived in smaller communities and tribes and stuff, everyone in the tribe had to be like at their best to help the tribe and the community and the city grow, you know? So, and it all starts with the self. So if you see people who are suffering outwardly in some way, obesity or anger or anxiety and these kinds of things that we all deal from, as, all things that are natural to us as human, when you see that excess behavior, it's because something other than self-care is the priority,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. Uh, if you actually love yourself, you wouldn't be obese. Like all the people who are staying obese or fat and calling that self love, they are not loving themselves. Like if you need to take care of yourself how you would take care of someone you love, right? Like if there's an external person that you love,
Yeah,
you would like put in
absolutely.
a lot of effort to take care of them, right? Like
Yeah,
you need to take care of yourself like how you take care of someone else that you love.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. 100%, you know? And yeah, and you gotta be, I don't like the word selfish, but like, that's how it has to be. You have to take care of yourself. Like I said, you're the only one who's walking through this world, like, as you. So you have to care for yourself so that you can be your best self. And by like being your best self, that's how you live your best life, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, but you have to like be at your best to draw those things to you, and it all ties into manifesting. And that's what I'm
Mhm.
saying. Like it doesn't, like at this point, there's not a lot that I like specifically manifest towards other than just keep my progress and growth going, and like wishing good to all those around me and everybody in the world. Like, so I just get up and do what I'm doing with just that as the goal, and whatever positive things come to me in whatever form that is, I'm more than content with that. And I think that kind of mindset comes from just putting in the work, and you have to. And like you said, you got to get away from comfort, and you got to push yourself into things that seem hard. And it's not just they seem hard, they are hard, but you get used to it, and it just, you feel more fulfilled, when
Yeah.
you go to sleep at night. When you go to sleep at night, you feel more fulfilled, and when you wake up in the morning, like you're excited to start a new day, as opposed to wanting to always sleep, or always wanting to like just go seek comfort because you're always so stressed out and unhappy.
Yeah. I am
you
so
know
stoked by like how you define manifestation, how you talk about growth, because that is exactly how I connect to you on so many different levels. It's like whatever you're talking, I am about to say the same things, and you're just taking the words out of my mouth, and it's so
Oh, that's awesome, man.
it's so amazing because like manifesting growth to me is also focusing on the progress. And I I want to learn. I want to be a better version of myself, and I want to keep growing, keep learning. And like that is particularly being manifested through this podcast, because like we both come from such different backgrounds. Like you're from New Jersey and I'm from India, and there's we come from different age groups, but we're still able to talk and connect on various levels. To me that is so fascinating. So like my
I think
growth
so.
has manifested into this, and like me learning
Yeah.
things from you.
Well, me too. I mean, I've been on my process, and it brought me to the same place, so I think that 100%. And that's what I'm saying, like I don't hold on to what is going to be brought to me. I know I'm on the right path doing what I need to do to grow. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's this guy, like, boom, you're going to, the universe is just sent, you're going this way, I'm going this way. And it's like, bam, there you go. You hit together. And then that's how this happens, and I think that that's great. And having that like openness to whatever happens is going to happen, I think that brings like a sense of like adventure and like brightness to the day. And I think that I think it's awesome that like we linked up, and that was because of the Shredded Farmer. Like
Yeah.
he does all the same, like he does a lot of the same like workouts that I do, and then I heard him on the podcast, and it went from there. It's awesome, super cool.
this this takes me to how I define karma. Like I've read like couple of like interesting like Hindu relics and Vedas, and like a lot of spiritual, not a lot of spiritual books, but I come from a perspective where like I wanna probably try to find definition, or like find like a redefining what I already think is something. So that's how I went looking for like what exactly is karma. Like in this modern day language, like we use karma as like what goes around comes around, right? Like whatever you do, that manifests itself
Yeah,
back.
yeah, yeah.
And that is not all karma is. Like karma is
No.
much more a broader aspect. Karma is action. Like the
Yeah.
true definition of karma means action. And there are three types of karma, and one is basically the karma that is being carried, the actions that you did in your previous life. Like that's what Hindu like proper spirituality says. And like
Yeah.
you carry karma from your previous life to this life, which is, I don't completely believe that, because I haven't experienced death, or like I haven't experienced something that would face me with that, like with that construct yet. But so I haven't really like thought about that much. But the other two definition of karma is, one is basically what your surrounding will do to you. It's basically a lot of who you are is defined by your surroundings, how you grow up, right? Like that is
Yeah.
the second definition of karma. It's like basically when I talked to a psychologist on this podcast, Neha Taparia, and we did an episode on like child psychology, and she says that a lot of what a person is actually determined by how the environment was when the person was a child, and
Oh,
that
absolutely.
that karma, like how your environment was, is actually making you who you are, and that's the second definition of karma. And like the first definition of karma is basically what you do. That's where the free will comes, right? I don't think much about the reincarnation and carrying karma to the next life. I don't think about that much, but I think about these two definitions of karma like every day, because what I am doing is framing someone else's life, someone else's karma, and what someone else is doing to me is framing my course of action. So, in this podcast, whatever you are doing or like whatever you are saying is framing my next course of action, right? In that way, you are creating my karma.
Yeah.
So,
It's like having it's like having a conversation with the universe, you know? Like you
yeah.
go back and forth and like what is said to you then formulates like what you're gonna say back, you know?
Yeah. And for the longest period of time, I was thinking, is everything predestined? Like, is everything like the karma, or
Right.
does the concept of free will exist? And I came to this conclusion: it is 50-50. Like I just defined karma, right? Like what you
Yeah.
do and what happens to you, like these two
Right.
are like like 50-50. It's like we are like everybody's life is so interconnected. Like I am having influence in your life right now, and you are having influence in my life, and we live like so many kilometers away. And
Yeah. So
there is
many.
a beautiful dance between free will and destiny that is happening here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's really cool, you know, and just because, you know, all from me liking the same kind of workout that that guy did, you know, it all just brings it together. You never know. That's what I'm saying, is you never know. You could be as prepared as possible, right? But that's only half of it. Like you said, like that's only one half of like that you have your free will and you can prepare that as much as possible and work on yourself as much as possible. But then like you don't have a you don't have a say in like what the challenge is going to be,
Yeah.
you know? Do you get that? Like that's kind of how I see
Yeah.
it, is like I could put on, you know, I could put on the armor and pull out the sword, but like when I walk in the arena, like I don't know what I'm going to be facing. Like
Yeah.
what's going to happen, you know? Like
Yeah.
uh-oh, there's a dragon, you
It's
know?
like
Like
acting in a movie where you know only
yeah.
your lines and you don't know what the other, like a co-actor, is
Yeah, it's
gonna
like an
say.
improv. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like an improv. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely, it's like an improv. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you just keep, and that's another thing too, is like framing, you know, your mindset that way and seeing life that way, it kind of makes you, you know, appreciate it more and like have more fun with it, you know, and kind of take things that happen as like a joke, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
be more joyful and playful with it, you know, and enjoy it much more. So like whatever happens, there's always going to be a way that you can see it and perceive it differently and flip it on its head and make it a positive, you know, and grow from it. You know, everything, you know, positive or negative, is a chance for you to grow, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And like a lot of people have been asking me about like what changed in my life, because like I lost a bunch of weight, and then I started doing this podcast, and I started like posting stuff on social media about podcasts. So like whoever have known me for a long time, like they could literally see change physically because I lost weight, and also like I was doing
Yeah.
something with my life, like with this podcast. So a lot of people have been like DMing me, or like I have been talking a lot about like growth and all of that in this podcast. It all comes down to that one simple terminology, which is growth. And a part of me that brought me, or that will take me to where I want to go, is basically associating myself with people who promote my growth. So
Yeah.
like that's what it's been, like me equipping with things which will help me grow. and also
Yeah.
associating with people who, which is constructive, like the environment being constructive and like moving towards growth, because not a lot of your friends want to see you grow, right? Like they want you to stay in the shitty hole that they are in.
Yeah, I've lost friends, people that I was close with in the past couple of years because of the different way that I chose to live my life. And good, you're like better off without those people in your life. And you really are who you surround yourself with, you know? If you surround yourself with people who are like dirt bags or people who are negative or anxious, like they're only going to bring that into your life. But if you surround yourself with people who are good people and they try to, grow every day and they have a positive mindset, those are the people you want around you, because that's what's, just the same way. It's just the same way that whatever you keep in your mind is what you're going to attract to you. Like the people around you, whatever way they behave, like that's how you're going to, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's why, I was on Instagram a couple years ago and I got off because it was just too crazy. And now I got back on and I'm happy I'm back. And the people that I follow on there are just, everybody's all positive, and that's that's all I want. The only kind of people I surround myself with are people who are like positive and interested in growth, and I don't do the negativity thing.
Holy smokes, man, like I didn't expect this conversation to take this road. Like you're such an amazing person to talk to. Like I had like super fun doing this.
Yeah, man, this was awesome.
So like
Let's definitely do
before,
it again. This is great.
yes, let's do this again. Like I'm glad you said that. Before we end the podcast, I would, this is the first time I'm doing this with any guest. If you could give like pieces of advice to like youngsters or to anybody who's listening to this, so what would that advice be?
Um, just be, whatever situation you're in right now, even if it's a situation you want to change, just be grateful for where you are right now. Because if whatever you're experiencing, it means that you're alive, and it means that you have time to change your life, for the better. And just be grateful for the things that you do have and work from there. Never be ungrateful, and just understand that the only person who can change your life is you. And there's no upper limit on how much you can achieve if you put yourself to it, but you have to start, you know? And if you need help, there's a million people out there, myself included. You can send me a DM on Instagram, reach out to me if you need help with anything. And there's a lot of other people that I know and people you can find everywhere that are willing to help, but you have to just put in the effort, and cultivate that mindset that you're going to do the work and the good things are going to come to you, and they will. So,
Yeah.
but you got to put the work in. You got to put the
S-
work in.
Start at where you are with what you have, right?
Always, always. Like I work out every day and I don't have a lot of gym equipment. But I do push-ups and I do pull-ups and I run and I make the gatas, for $15 out of stuff from the hardware store. So, you know, whatever you got going on in your life, like just start from where you're at and just start moving. Start cutting that path and start walking it.
Yeah.
You got to start.
This is my 32nd episode, I guess. But like so far, this is the conversation that I am gonna remember for a really long time. And so far, I can tell this has been one of my favorite episodes. Thank you so much for
Awesome.
making this such a special one to me.
Absolutely, man. I'm happy for you having me on. I'm really appreciative of that. And like I said, I would love to talk more with you and keep it going. This is great.
Yes, let's stay in touch. Hopefully, let's do this again.
Oh, of course, man. Of course.
For all the people listening, I would recommend, please go check Quest for Camera podcast. I'm gonna link the description. I'm gonna link the podcast in the description. I am in such a
Awesome.
trance right now. I'm having a hard time like articulating things because like our conversation was such a roller coaster. There's a lot of things that I haven't spoke about like with a lot of people, and now when I'm talking about
Yeah.
that, like I feel like I'm in a trance and I don't even have like words to like talk.
No, I mean that's no, definitely, and that's part of the reason why like I started the podcast is because I don't have a lot of people that I can talk this way with. You know, a lot of people aren't at the level where they would understand. They would make it sound like I'm crazy. You know, so
Yeah.
that's why I started talking about it on the podcast and posting stuff about it. And I figure, you know, it attracts people who are like-minded to me, and then we can actually have these conversations. So it's awesome. That's why I say, you know, if you want to reach out, and you know, start a conversation.
Yes, and I don't think you're crazy, and like I'm glad like our craziness is matching, and I'm gonna
Yeah,
be rooting for
yeah.
you, and I will be there to listen to more of your podcast. Keep
Oh,
doing
same
more
here,
of
man.
them. Like people
Same here.
need this. Like we need the content that you are putting out there, and
Oh, thank you, man. I really appreciate that.
yes,
You keep going too, man. This is great stuff. I love it.
thank you so much once again. I mean, like I feel like I can't get enough of you. So like I will definitely bring you back again, and I'm glad you'd be
of course,
excited
man.
to be back again.
Of course, man. And I'm sure we'll be texting all the time too on the DM. So
Yes.
of
Yes.
course, anytime, man. All right, buddy.
A Sankarshan Joshi trip.